Stay here for just a moment before you move on, before you scroll past or let this disappear into the background noise of your day. Because the fact that this found you right now may mean something more than you are giving it credit for. This was not some random landing in your feed. Something in you may have been quietly searching, reaching out in whatever invisible way we reach toward what we need, and these words made their way back to you. So give yourself a few minutes. Think about that person right now, the one who has been living in the back of your mind, the one your thoughts always seem to drift toward, no matter how busy your day gets. Let their face settle clearly in your mind, and then just notice what happens inside you when it does. That quiet pull somewhere in your chest, that strange mixture of warmth and aching and something that does not quite have a name. That feeling is not confusion, and it is not weakness. It is your heart recognizing something true before your mind has found the right words to catch up to it. Because this person did not simply wander into your life by coincidence. On some level deeper than logic, some part of you already feels a familiarity with them that is difficult to explain and even more difficult to dismiss. And I understand how heavy it can be to carry something this powerful while so much around it remains uncertain. The nights where you lay awake holding all of it inside yourself. The moments when you wonder whether the signs you keep noticing are real or whether you are simply too deep in your own hope to see clearly. Whether any of it will ever amount to anything. Whether the love you keep giving is landing anywhere at all. It matters. All of it matters far more than you currently understand. You are not being foolish. You are not being dramatic or unrealistically emotional. You are someone standing right in the middle of an experience that has the potential to become one of the most meaningful of your life. And that is precisely why it feels this difficult right now. That is why it does not just sit quietly in the background. It keeps pressing forward because it means something. What makes connections like this so intense is that they do not skim the surface of who we are. They reach down into the places we have spent years managing, concealing, and carefully guarding. The soft and unresolved places. The parts we built walls around after they were hurt. Most of us carry a picture of what love is supposed to feel like when it finally arrives correctly. We imagine it will come as relief, as the feeling of finally reaching still water after years of struggling to keep your head above the surface. But the connections that genuinely change us rarely arrive that gently. They come in more like weather first. They disturb things. They shake loose everything we have been storing beneath the surface, beneath the coping patterns and the pride and the carefully constructed distance we use to protect ourselves. And in the beginning, that shaking does not feel like growth. It feels like something breaking. When someone enters your life and reaches places nobody before them could access, the protective habits you have always relied on suddenly lose their effectiveness. They stop working the way they always have, and that is disorienting. For the person who has always given too much, the one who has spent their life pouring out love and effort and patience in order to feel close to someone, this kind of connection forces a painful and necessary reckoning. They begin to feel the exhaustion underneath all of that constant proving. They start questioning why they ever believed that closeness had to be earned, that love was a reward for enough sacrifice and enough endurance. That realization can be devastating because it asks them to look at a story they have been living by, the belief that they were not simply deserving of love by existing, that they always had to work for it, earn it, demonstrate their value to keep it close. And at the exact same time, the other person in this dynamic may be facing something equally frightening from a completely different direction. They may have learned somewhere along the way that emotional closeness was not safe. That intimacy had a cost. That getting too near to someone meant risking pain, disappointment, the kind of loss that changes you. Their nervous system developed its own way of surviving, and that way involved keeping a certain amount of emotional distance between themselves and anyone who started to feel important. They do not pull away because the connection means nothing. They pull away precisely because it means too much. Because the feelings become so strong and so real that the fear of losing themselves inside them or of ultimately being rejected becomes louder than the desire to stay. Looking at it from the outside, the pattern seems simple. One person moves closer while the other moves away. One pursues while the other retreats. But beneath the surface, what is actually happening is far more layered. In most cases, it is two people with wounds that mirror each other, responding to the exact same core fear, the fear of not being enough and the fear of being left, in opposite but equally understandable ways. The person who keeps reaching out may believe that if they stop, the love will disappear. That silence means abandonment. That pulling back means it is over. And so they keep moving forward, keep trying, keep showing up, because stillness feels like loss. But what they eventually have to learn, and this is one of the harder lessons, is that sacrificing themselves piece by piece for the sake of closeness is not love. It is a slow kind of self-erasure. Their worth is not a measure of how much they can endure. Their value is not calculated by how long they can wait or how much of themselves they are willing to set aside to make someone else comfortable enough to stay. And the person who withdraws carries the opposite wound, but the same fear underneath it. There is a belief somewhere inside them that real closeness will cost them their sense of self, that if they open completely, something irreversible will happen, that they will disappoint the person, lose them, or lose themselves inside the relationship, and so they instinctively create space whenever things start to feel too real. Yet that distance rarely delivers what they were hoping for. What it usually brings instead is guilt and a sharper awareness of how much they actually do care, because avoiding vulnerability does not remove the longing, it only prevents them from doing anything about it. Healing is not a graceful process. Not at the beginning. It rarely looks like what people imagine it will look like. It shows up as inconsistency and fear and long stretches of silence while someone is quietly trying to understand themselves more clearly. It looks like confusion before it looks like clarity. Growth almost always has to look messy before it starts to look wise. There is a reason the caterpillar does not simply grow wings gradually. It fully dissolves inside the darkness of the cocoon before it becomes something entirely different. Real transformation has always required something to end first. Not a physical ending, but the ending of old identities, old defenses, old ways of surviving that cannot continue inside a love that is genuine and deep. That is why these connections feel almost unbearable at times. They expose contradictions that have been living quietly inside us for years. They show us how intensely we want closeness, while also showing us how terrified of it we are. They force us to finally understand the difference between attachment and genuine love. Attachment says, I need you close because without you I do not feel complete. Genuine love, the kind that actually survives and grows, eventually arrives at something different. It says, I want to truly meet you while also learning how to remain whole within myself. That shift, from needing someone to fill an emptiness to choosing someone while already being enough, changes the entire nature of the connection. It changes everything. But there is something else in this journey that most people miss or overlook entirely. In every connection like this, a turning point eventually arrives, and it almost never comes through some dramatic moment or the conversation you have been waiting to have. It does not arrive because they finally say the words you have needed to hear. It comes because of something far quieter. A decision you make entirely within yourself. The decision to stop waiting to be chosen and to begin genuinely and wholeheartedly choosing yourself instead. When that internal shift happens, something in the entire dynamic begins to move. Not because love operates like a formula or because there is some mystical mechanism at work, but because the energy we carry into a connection is not neutral, it is felt. When you stop reaching towards someone from a place of fear or desperation or unmet need, you stop becoming something they feel the instinct to retreat from. For perhaps the first time, they are left alone with what they genuinely feel about you. Not what they are afraid of. Not what they have been avoiding or drowning out with distractions, but what has actually been living inside them this entire time. And what lives there may never have gone away at all. So I want you to trust something, even if trusting feels difficult right now. Everything you have moved through during this waiting period has carried meaning. Every single moment of it, even the ones that felt purposeless and exhausting. I know there are times when you look back at everything you have given and wonder whether it dissolved into empty air, whether it reached anyone, whether the love you carried was worth the weight of carrying it. But love does not simply evaporate. Every evening you spent sitting with these feelings. Every night you fell asleep holding something unspoken in your chest. All of it has been shaping you in ways you are not yet fully able to see. That love is still real. It continues to deepen you and expand your capacity to hold something extraordinary when it finally finds its full place in your life. When you cry because something that feels so right is also causing so much pain, that is not evidence of fragility. Those are not the tears of someone too weak to handle reality. They are often the outward expression of a heart that refuses to let go of something it recognizes as genuinely meaningful. They speak to a kind of loyalty and emotional courage that most people will never understand because most people would have already found their way to the exit by now. It would have been easy to build walls. It would have been simple to convince yourself that loving this deeply was a liability you could not afford. Yet here you are, still feeling, still holding hope, still refusing to close yourself off completely, even when part of you is genuinely tired. That says something real about your strength. Not because endless waiting is always the answer or because suffering is noble, but because your capacity to remain open has survived conditions that would have led many people to shut down permanently. There is something truly remarkable about that. The truth is that the most important transformation in a situation like this often happens long before two people finally come together. Sometimes the deeper purpose of a connection is not immediately about union. Sometimes it is about what it asks you to become, what it reveals about your patterns and your wounds, what it teaches you about self-respect and emotional balance, what it shows you about your ability to maintain a connection to your own worth even when someone else is not reflecting it back to you. These are not the exciting parts of the lesson, but they become some of the most important ones. And perhaps that is what this chapter has been teaching you all along. Not how to pursue more skillfully, not how to wait with more patience, not how to become more appealing to someone who is emotionally unavailable, but how to come back to yourself, how to stop measuring your value through another person's choices or their silence or their inconsistency, how to recognize that your heart needs your care first before it can sustainably offer that care to anyone else. Because the kind of love that actually lasts is never built on fear. It is never maintained through anxiety or self-sacrifice or endless endurance. It grows between two people who are learning to stand on their own while still consciously choosing each other. It grows when both people stop running from themselves, when honesty becomes more bearable than avoidance, and when being truly seen starts to feel safer than hiding. Whatever comes next, do not diminish what you have already moved through. The person you were before this connection is genuinely not the person reading these words right now. You have grown in ways that are real, even if they are quiet. Your awareness has deepened. Your understanding of yourself has become richer. Even the pain has taught you something specific and valuable about what matters most to you and what you will no longer accept as sufficient. And if there is one thing worth holding on to, it is this. The love you carry should never ask you to disappear from yourself. The connection that is truly meant to grow in your life will not require you to become smaller or less worthy in order to survive. It will ask you to become more fully yourself. It will support your growth instead of quietly demanding your erasure. It will feel like authenticity rather than constant effort. So carry that forward. Keep caring if your heart still wants to care. Keep hoping if hope still feels honest. But do not put your entire life on hold for a certainty that can only come from someone else. Keep moving. Keep building. Keep choosing yourself every day, because the moment you genuinely do, your entire experience begins to look different. And sometimes when you finally release your grip on what you are afraid of losing, you discover that what was always meant for you has been making its way toward you the entire time. Many people reach the point you have been standing in and quietly begin to close themselves off. The emotional cost eventually feels like more than they can afford to keep paying. You had every reason to make that same decision. Nobody would have questioned it. It would have made complete sense. But you chose differently. You stayed open when closing down would have been simpler. You kept your heart soft when hardening it was available as an easier option. In a world that frequently rewards emotional guardedness and treats vulnerability as a weakness, your decision to remain open is not a flaw in your character. It is one of the most quietly courageous things a person can do. It is a kind of strength that many people never find access to because they stop trusting before they can ever find out what was possible. To love someone deeply without constantly calculating your return on that investment is rare. That kind of love is the material from which lasting connections are actually built. You chose to stay present through confusion, through separation, through long stretches where nothing felt certain and silence was the only thing filling the space. You did it without becoming bitter, without hardening, without turning your care into resentment. That does not come from a book or from watching how other people handle things. It comes from somewhere genuine inside a person. Either that capacity exists in you or it does not, and it clearly does. That is not a minor detail about who you are. It may be one of the most defining things. And it is exactly that quality that is guiding you in the direction of something real. Not toward a connection that keeps you permanently off balance. Not toward a relationship where you spend your days decoding mixed signals and wondering where you actually stand. Not toward a love that makes you feel like you are always bracing for the floor to drop out from under you. You are moving towards something that fits, something that does not ask you to shrink. A connection that feels natural rather than exhausting. A love that feels like finally releasing a breath you have been holding in your chest for far too long. That is not just a comforting image. It is a genuinely real possibility, but it depends on what you decide to do next. And I'm not going to pretend the answer is simple. What it looks like is this. You intentionally bring your attention back to yourself, not as a strategy, not as a performance designed to make someone notice what they are missing, not as a way of sending a message or engineering a reaction. You genuinely begin redirecting the emotional energy that has been flowing outward, and you start putting some of it back into your own life. You begin asking yourself a question you may not have asked honestly in a very long time. What do I actually need right now? Not what do they need? Not what can I do differently to shift things? Not what would finally make them open up or come back or be ready? What do you need? What would genuinely feel nourishing to you today? What parts of your own life have been patiently waiting while so much of your attention remained fixed on something uncertain and just slightly out of reach? You begin filling those spaces. You start saying yes to yourself with some of the same energy you have been pouring into everyone else. The dreams you quietly set aside because life did not feel settled enough to pursue them. You begin revisiting them. The experiences you delayed because your heart was occupied somewhere else. You begin letting yourself have them. The friendships that drifted while your emotional focus was elsewhere. You start reaching back toward some of those people. The parts of yourself that have been sitting patiently on a shelf somewhere, waiting for you to remember them. You bring them back. None of this means pretending the feelings are gone. You do not have to force yourself to stop caring. You do not need to convince yourself that something meaningful was actually meaningless. This is simply about expanding your world again, about making sure your entire life is not resting its full weight on one person and one possible outcome, about remembering that your life is larger than any single story unfolding within it. And when you genuinely begin doing this, something starts to shift beneath the surface. It is not dramatic. It does not usually happen overnight. Most people do not even notice it right away. But it is real. You stop feeling like an incomplete sentence waiting for someone else to arrive and finish it. You stop feeling like your life is suspended in some kind of endless waiting room where nothing important can happen until one particular situation resolves itself. Instead, you start feeling whole again. You feel like someone whose life has purpose and movement and meaning that is not dependent on what any one relationship is doing at any given moment. You feel grounded in your own existence rather than hanging from someone else's uncertainty. And that groundedness changes everything about how you show up. People feel it even when they cannot explain what is different. There is something unmistakable about a person who is genuinely at home in themselves. It creates a quiet kind of confidence, a calm that is not performed, a presence that draws things toward it rather than reaching outward in need. Real magnetism does not pursue, it attracts. And the person you have been loving through all of this will feel that shift too, probably more clearly than anyone else. They will notice something has changed. Not because this is some technique for producing a specific result. The last thing you need is another strategy for managing someone else's feelings. This is simply what naturally happens when someone stops relating to the world from a place of depletion and begins relating from a place of genuine fullness. The whole connection breathes differently. Space opens for something authentic to emerge that simply could not exist before. There is something else worth sitting with. They are not the villain in this story. I know there have likely been moments where the hurt made it tempting to see them that way. Moments where the silence or the inconsistency or the distance made it easier to frame things as simple as someone clearly in the wrong and someone clearly in the right. But people are almost never that straightforward. They are not cold. They are not indifferent to you. What has been showing up as distance is usually something far more layered and complicated than it appears. Many people learned long before they ever met you that love was something to be cautious about. Somewhere in their history, closeness became associated with pain or disappointment or loss or an emotional overwhelm they did not know how to manage. Love began to feel expensive, risky, something that asked more than they believed they could safely give. They did not choose that belief deliberately. Nobody does. It gets woven into a person through experiences that shape them long before they have the words or the perspective to understand what is happening. It becomes part of how they protect themselves from being hurt again. So what looks like withdrawal from the outside is often someone managing a fear that has been living in them for years. In the quiet spaces between distractions, when there is no noise left to drown out what they actually feel, you are there. They feel your absence even during the stretches when they were the ones who created it. There is something unresolved inside them that is connected to you, and it does not disappear simply because there is less contact. Because what they feel is not really about physical closeness. It is tied to something deeper that they have not yet fully worked through. And that unfinished work is not yours to carry for them. You cannot move through it on their behalf, no matter how clearly you can see what they need. No matter how much love you have to offer, no matter how deeply you want to help ease their way through it. That journey belongs entirely to them. The most powerful thing available to you is the decision to refuse to let their fears define your value, to refuse to absorb their unresolved wounds as evidence that something is lacking in you. Their struggle is their struggle. Their healing belongs to them. And your worth remains completely intact regardless of where they currently are on their path. What you can do is carry yourself with a dignity and a steady kind of self-respect that means when they finally move through whatever has been holding them back, what they encounter is you at your absolute best. Not worn down by waiting, not emptied out by longing, not still searching for a validation you should have been giving yourself all along, but someone standing clearly in their own light, someone grounded, someone complete, someone genuinely ready for what comes next. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a morning that may be much closer than it currently feels. You wake up, and the first thing you notice is that the heaviness is gone. That particular weight that has lived in your chest for so long, you almost stopped recognizing it as extra. That low, constant ache beneath the surface of everything, it is just gone. Not because the feelings disappeared, not because you forced yourself into some kind of emotional distance or decided to stop caring. The weight is gone because the love has finally found a place where it belongs. Because what once sat unresolved has found its resolution. Because what used to exist only somewhere in the future has finally arrived into the present. Imagine looking at this person and actually seeing their face clearly. And what you see there is something either entirely new or something that has been absent for a long time. You do not see hesitation. You do not see the quiet conflict behind their eyes, the familiar expression of someone who is physically present but holding part of themselves at a careful distance. What you see instead is peace, not an overwhelming or dramatic peace, a quiet, settled kind, the kind that belongs to someone who has made a full and complete choice and has stopped questioning it, someone who is no longer managing their feelings or keeping something held in reserve, someone with both feet entirely in the same room as you. Imagine what it would feel like for love to no longer wake you up at 2 in the morning as a source of anxiety. A love that does not keep you awake, replaying old conversations and searching for meanings that were not there and wondering what you could have done differently. Imagine your nervous system being given genuine permission to rest. A love where you are not constantly scanning for signals, not quietly preparing yourself for the next wave of disappointment, not holding uncertainty in the seat beside you every single day. The right relationship is not built on proving your worth, but on being fully accepted by someone who values every part of who you are. Both people arrive, having done their own healing and growth, creating a strong foundation for genuine love. Even when progress feels invisible and the future uncertain, every act of self-respect, self-care and personal growth is preparing you for something meaningful. The difficult middle stage is not proof that you are lost. It is simply part of the journey, and if you keep moving forward with faith and patience, what is meant for you will eventually reveal itself.